I really don't think it was a game changer.
Political observers say they believe the second debate between the leading U.S. Senate candidates was informative, but likely not going to move too many voters. But for the Tillis campaign, they believe an issue that came up in a post-debate press conference could make a difference.
There was one, and what had happened at that hearing, it was scheduled early in the day. And then votes were scheduled, and that hearing then had to be postponed later that day. So yes, I did miss that one.
Senator Kay Hagan is talking about an Armed Services Committee meeting that she missed in order to attend a fundraiser, a meeting where details about the ISIS threat overseas was detailed.
But this is a time of war. I mean, it may not look like that to some people back here in the States because we haven't declared it, but the people who are over there fighting it, they definitely know it's a time of war. So priorities are important.
Hagan argues she is well educated on the ISIS issue and has been at many meetings on the matter. And she is quick to point out that attendance isn't Tillis's strong suit either.
But you know what? Speaker Tillis's hometown newspaper called on him to resign.
In fact, as Speaker of the House, Tillis missed several debates over the past few years, but he says that is comparing apples and oranges.
The difference is I'm not a senator who sits on the Armed Services Committee responsible for having an answer to wiping ISIS off the face of the map.
Hagan advocates disagree.
If we want to talk about attendance, that's fine, but there's only one candidate in this race that's been called on to resign because of their attendance issues.
For political observers, they say they are not sure this issue will change too many minds at the polls, but could still resonate with voters.
Now it points to a larger issue, which is, we pay these people to do their job. The huge demands of fundraising pull them away from their job. We should be concerned about that.
Loretta Boniti, Time Warner Cable News.
As with a lot of things, women in politics, it's been a long time coming, but she's played a big role in this.
She has, and in recent years there's been a lot of spotlight on breaking the glass ceiling for women in politics, from a woman serving as the Speaker of the House to a potential front runner for the next presidential bid being a woman. But as we're set to swear in this 114th Congress, still only 1 out of every 5 members is a woman.
And it is with great honor that I stand before you tonight as the 100th woman in the 113th Congress.
It was just weeks ago that North Carolina's newest member of Congress was sworn in as the record-breaking 100th woman in the 113th Congress. When lawmakers take the oath of office on Tuesday, there will be a new record: 104 women serving in the Capitol.
I think people still consider it alarmingly small, but I think for the women it's a small step.
For Adams, who helped to crack the 100 mark, she says she believes it's important that more female voices are heard.
Women have found ways to work together, not only with their female colleagues, but with their male colleagues. When they were looking at shutting the government down, it was the women who came together on both sides of the aisle to really help rectify that particular situation.
Adams is joined in the House by 2 other female members of North Carolina's congressional delegation, Virginia Foxx and Renee Elmers.
6 years ago, North Carolinians gave me
One of 2 women who lost their seats in Congress was also from North Carolina. Senator Kay Hagan lost to incoming Senator Thom Tillis.
Partisanship doesn't help solve the problems.
For Foxx, who is beginning her 6th term in the U.S. House, she says it's important to have a diversity of voices in the Capitol.
Women bring their perspective, men bring their perspective. As I said, farmers bring a perspective, educators bring a perspective. You need the different points of view in order to get good legislation.
Davidson College professor Susan Roberts says the rise of women in power is palatable, but it is noteworthy that male and female leaders are perceived differently.
Voters perceive that women are more trustworthy, more empathetic, more willing to compromise, and men are perceived to be more aggressive, more ready to take on conflict. And I think some of it's perception, because voters that had looked at the 2014 election surely saw, if you remember, Joni Ernst, who was elected, first woman ever elected from Iowa. Hers was a very much no holds barred, I work on a farm and I've been in the military and bring it on kind of aggressive campaign.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my freshman colleague from New York.
Renee Elmer says the strength of the women's voice is becoming more and more important, not only in Congress, but also in determining who serves there.
I believe we women in this country are going to be determining the next president. We're going to be determining the elections into the future, and therefore we need to have a stronger voice in Congress.
The breakdown is 20 females in the Senate, 84 in the House. 76 of the women in Congress are Democrats, and 28 are Republicans. But even though a majority of the women will be in the minority party come Tuesday, Roberts says the biggest question is whether or not the growing number of women can help change the tone in Congress, which has become increasingly negative.
They can't exacerbate it. Whether or not they can help it, I don't know, because the polarization issue is so entrenched and it's party first. The women may be able to work across the aisle with one another. It's a smaller group. They may have some characteristics that are given more toward conversation and collaboration.
Loretta, North Carolina has a little bit of a unique perspective when it comes to this issue as well, right?
Well, it does. North Carolina actually has 2 Republican female members of Congress, and obviously when you look at that ratio of how many Republican versus Democratic female members of Congress that there are, it's obviously not as nearly as many Republicans, about a third as many. So the fact that we have 2 Republicans and only 1 Democrat in it makes us a bit unique.
Really stands out. All right, Loretta Boniti.
The decision came down Monday morning. The U.S. Supreme Court is vacating a North Carolina Supreme Court approval of state district maps.
This was race-based redistricting, worse than we had seen since the 19th century.
This comes with no comment from the justices, but with reference to a decision from last month on Alabama's district lines. Legislative leaders say this is just part of the process.
The U.S. Supreme Court has not said that our maps were not constitutional. They merely asked the North Carolina Supreme Court to take one more look at it and see if the Alabama case has any bearing on it. I don't think it does, and I don't think our justices will either.
Now, these redistricting maps are quite important in the political process. Whichever party is in charge when the maps are drawn will often draw the maps to keep that power in their favor. In this case, the Republicans were in charge. Republicans drew the maps, and Republicans have been able to maintain supermajorities both here in the Senate and in the House under these new maps, as well as gain 10 of the 13 congressional seats. But plaintiffs looking to have the district lines redrawn say they are considering this a step towards victory.
This means that the North Carolina General Assembly and our U.S. congressional delegations are probably illegally constituted.
And the NAACP and others acted fast after the U.S. court ruling came down, hours later asking the state Supreme Court for an expedited schedule to reconsider, saying, quote, plaintiffs now respectfully move the court to establish an expedited schedule for resolving these cases on remand that is designed reasonably to assure that the 2016 legislative and congressional elections are held under valid and lawful redistricting plans. Loretta Boniti, Time Warner Cable News.
Subsidies. The governor had indicated earlier this year that the ruling could have an impact on whether or not he would recommend expanding the state's Medicaid program. But as our senior political reporter Loretta Boniti tells us, this ruling may not move that Medicaid issue any closer to resolution. She joins us tonight from the General Assembly with reaction to the ruling. Loretta?
Well, a lot of folks thought when this decision came down from the Supreme Court that it might restart the conversation about Medicaid expansion in North Carolina. But some state leaders say that conversation is already closed. With the U.S. Supreme Court ruling saying that citizens in all states can get subsidies for health insurance through the Affordable Care Act, states who were bracing for potential chaos if the ruling had gone the other way can now move on to other issues associated with the law. President Barack Obama says he wants that effort to be on Medicaid expansion.
I'm going to work as hard as I can to convince more governors and state legislatures to take advantage of the law, put politics aside, and expand Medicaid and cover their citizens.
North Carolina is one of those states that did not accept federal dollars through the Affordable Care Act to expand Medicaid. Earlier this year, Governor Pat McCrory said he was making his recommendation on expansion until after the ruling.
It's a very complex issue. You can't just say, are you for or against it?
On Thursday, he was not ready to make a decision. He says he is studying how successful expansion has been in other states and if he believes it could work in North Carolina.
We've got to make sure that in order to take care of those people falling through the cracks, that we don't break the entire system for those who currently have insurance. And that's the balance at this point in time.
But the final decision for expansion would need to pass through the legislature. For his part, the leader of the Senate is clear. He's against it.
We continue to have a Medicaid system that grows at rates far greater than inflation. We cannot contemplate adding more people to the Medicaid rolls at a time when we are having difficulty sustaining the Medicaid system that we currently have. So, I mean, that situation is exactly as it was before this decision.
Now, right now, the House, Senate, and Governor are all working on Medicaid reform. That reform right now does not include expansion.
So Loretta, at this point, based on what we just heard from Senator Berger, unless they can change his mind, I mean, it's out of the equation right now.
Pretty much. If it's not going to pass through the legislature, even if the governor were to recommend it to them, you'd have to change his mind. You'd have to change a lot of the House members' minds. So really, it does look like this is a closed conversation at this point.
All right, so we're supposed to have a budget in place by next Wednesday. They can do a continuing resolution to do that. There was almost talk of doing that today, right?
Oh, they were back and forth today trying to work on that continuing resolution. They went into recess. They went into recess again, saying they were getting close. However, apparently they didn't get close enough. They were unable to agree on how to extend the current budget, which probably does not bode well for the overall budget negotiations. We're hearing that there's some sticking points in the continuing resolution that might be a little bit longer. It might go into September on issues, things like teacher assistant funding, things like driver's education funding. These are things that were set to run out on July 1st. House and Senate have very different ways of funding, if at all, these areas, and they have to decide whether or not they're going to fund them past July 1st.
And was there a Christmas tree on someone's desk today? I certainly hope that was a joke.
It was a joke, but yes, they did pull it out and put it on their desk today. I mean, that's really kind of what the joke is that's going around here, is folks are saying you better make your Christmas list now and send them around to all the members, because it looks like we might be in town around Christmas time.
Oh, Lord, that will be truly a long session here in North Carolina. Our senior political reporter, Loretta Boniti, thank you. After a stop in Durham, senior political reporter Loretta Boniti had a chance to sit down with him to talk about VA issues, Iran, and Loretta Lynch. Here's that conversation.
Well, Senator, thanks so much for joining us while you're here in Durham today. Let's first talk about what you've been doing this last week, touring some of these VA facilities here in North Carolina. Why are you doing this?
So that I can cut through the information that you only get from the press or you get in committees, to be on the ground and speak with the people responsible for the facilities. We started on Tuesday in Fayetteville. We're here this morning and we'll be in Salisbury this afternoon.
I mean, obviously, we've seen the national attention pointed on the VA facilities and the concerns with them. What have you been seeing as you've been inside of them and actually talking to folks?
Well, I think that generally speaking, at least for the North Carolina facilities, we have some issues in other facilities. When they get admitted, when they get appointment, they get pretty good care. And the average veteran prefers to be treated in a VA facility. The problem is one of capacity and unacceptable wait times, the length of time. In some of our facilities, it varies, but we have down in Fayetteville, I think, an average of somewhere around 30 days. That's unacceptable for a lot of conditions, maybe not all of them. But that average is something that concerns us, and I've asked for more information, and I'm sure that with some of the reports this week of increased wait times, that'll become a subject of focus of a VA meeting.
I mean, I think a lot of people looked at, it was probably about a year ago when we were first hearing about that, the wait time issue, and then Congress did allocate a substantial sum of money to try to help with the issue. In reality, how hard is this issue, though, to actually fix? How much more needs to be done? What can be done at the congressional level?
I think it comes along several tracks. I think we make it harder than it needs to be, and some of that is the control that Congress has placed on the VA. Some of that is what the bureaucrats in the VA have placed on the operating units, and some of that's what people are doing down in the medical centers that they don't need to do. So we need to step back and say, what are we trying to accomplish here? Better care, faster for veterans.
Let's talk about what else you've done over your break that you've had from Congress. You went overseas to the Middle East. Tell me about this trip. What was the purpose of it?
Well, a lot of it, we had 5 freshmen and the majority leader, McConnell, on the trip. A lot of it was just to increase our education, but then speak with the people on the ground, the leaders of the countries. Excuse me, we met with most of the prime ministers, the presidents, the leaders of the parliament. We met with the representatives from our embassies. We also met with soldiers and enlisted to get a more comprehensive view of what's on the ground, because we have a lot of issues we have to look at. What can we do to assist Iraq with an increasingly unstable situation? They made some progress, but they got a long way to go. What can we do to convince the president and the administration that making the same mistake in Afghanistan will produce potentially the same outcome as we've seen in Iraq? So hearing on the ground, do we need to be there to support counterterrorism, insurgency, and national security initiatives that are going on in Afghanistan? So it was very helpful. There's no replacement in Jordan. That's another thing I think that's underreported, and it's the humanitarian, the refugee crisis in Jordan and in the northern part of Iraq up in the Kurdish region. They've had influxes of populations that would be, for Jordan, it'd be the equivalent of 60 million refugees coming to the United States as a percentage of the population. For the Kurdish region, it'd be nearly 100 million. So virtually all of Canada and Mexico seeking refuge in the United States. That's the level of stress that they're having on their systems. And it was very helpful so that we can come back and see what we can do to help.
And the other significant issue of foreign interest right now is this tentative deal with Iran. Talk to me a little bit about where you stand on this right now and what you think needs to be done once Congress is back in session.
I think to talk about the Iranian nuclear deal, you have to think about Iran as a whole. And Iran is fighting a full spectrum war right now. I mean, if you think about it, they have part of their military in Iraq. They have them in Syria. They have advisors in other places. They have what's called the Iranian terror network that's set up in several countries, including this hemisphere, relationships that they've established that could be activated. They have proven to cheat on inspections in the past. So I look at this as I have to be completely convinced that we have the necessary inspections and controls in place to make sure that it's not a matter of when they can build a bomb, that they can never build a bomb. And it's not clear to me that based on the outline of the agreement that I've seen, that they're going to get there. Now, the administration said it's a work in progress. We'll have an end result, but I think even the outline is problematic because of what it says in terms of where they're ultimately going to go. I fully support Republicans and many Democrats who think that it should come before a vote of the Congress, and I'm guardedly optimistic we'll pass that legislation when we get back.
And the one other issue I wanted to ask you about when you come back, a lot of folks are wondering, is there going to be a confirmation vote for Loretta Lynch? You've been clear on where you stand on this.
I've also been clear on the fact that I think that she deserves a vote. I signed the memo supporting cloture, which would allow the vote to come up. There have been others who wanted to block it, but the leader has made what I think is an appropriate decision. And we had a bipartisan bill on human trafficking that came out of the committee I serve on, Judiciary, unanimous vote. And then for political reasons, people have tried to hold it up. And I think that the leader has made it very clear that the vote on Ms. Lynch will happen just after the vote on human trafficking. So it's really in the minority leader's hands to determine when he wants that vote to come forward.
All right, time for one last break.